Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds of all ages, welcome to Warhammered, the show where we drink and talk about Warhammer in a semi-constructive sort of way. This evening, we have the illustrious Martin Orlando from Warhammer TV fame.
Hi. Nice to see everybody.
And after a long hiatus in the YouTube world, we also have James from Star Mini Gaming. How are you doing, James?
Great. It's good to be back. I'm glad to finally have some free time for once.
Right. I can imagine. So first things first, what's everybody drinking?
Ice cold water. Sorry to be lame.
That's okay. Your liver needs a break sometimes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Dez could not make it with us this evening. Although I can pass along that rest assured that although he is not here this evening, he is damaging his liver just as badly as if he were here.
All right.
Possibly. James, what do you have in your hand this evening?
I have my usual, the Reds peach ale. I'm partial to it. I grew up in the peach capital of the world, Parker County, Texas, and so I'm definitely partial to anything that's a good peach flavor.
Very interesting. I am once again drinking my Bar Hill gin with it's fermented with honey, so it's a really interesting flavor. Little gin and tonic action. It's my my standard these days. I've been doing a low carb diet, so beer is kind of out of the question. But yeah,
you got a little bit of my ancestry there in yours. My ancestors' mead almost echoed in your beer.
Yes, exactly. It has definitely a close flavor to mead. So yeah, we're going to talk about some Stormcast Eternals, as well as Martin's trip to Mecca, aka Warhammer World, his experience on Warhammer TV, all of the goodies he got from, I could only assume, some chloroform-filled rags and some torture to get information out of people at GW. That's what I'm hoping for anyway.
The secret is to find them at 10 o'clock in the morning and ask nicely, because they're probably not fully awake yet.
Yes. So yeah. What was the Warhammer TV experience like? Now that you are back, you're all rested back up from the experience. You have some retrospect that you can put on it.
So just to provide a little context, originally the game on Warhammer Television was not my goal. It was a nice surprise, and I'm very thankful to the Warhammer community team for allowing me to play there. Originally, the person I played against, his name is Nick Baton. He, for those of you who saw the Squats video where they unveiled the new model coming to Necromunda, he is the individual opposite Duncan in that video. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for quite a while. Originally, I had challenged him just to a pickup game the next time I was going to Warhammer World. I knew it was going to be like a year and a half in the making, because it's not every day that some of us get to go to Warhammer World. His boss, Martin Marin, he's the as some of them call Irish Martin, who is in charge of the stream as far as I understand it. He got wind of it, and him being the marketing social media guru that he is, decided to hype the crap out of it. Made it bigger than Clegane Bowl, as I heard someone say. And just it kept going and going and going. And I think I've generated enough goodwill amongst Games Workshop employees that even in just like the Warhammer television Twitch chat, whenever I would ask a question, they would say, "Hey, it's Martin." And I'm very thankful to just have that sort of notoriety. But just from the hype of the game, it just grew and grew and grew into this thing. And Martin saw my Stormcast as I was posting them on the internet through Twitter and Instagram. And he said, it's just like, "Hey, Martin, you're going to be fully painted in time to come to the stream, right?" And it's like, "Yes, I'm going to be there all week." And he said, "Okay, just come play on the stream." And we ended up doing that. and I had a great time. It was just like a normal game. It's they don't have the same bright lights as they do like when you go to Adepticon, because having been acquainted with some individuals that played on the stream during Adepticon, they had to, because that room's pretty dim, the big hall that they have Adepticon in for Age of Sigmar. So to get the lighting right for the table, they had to put these giant key lights next to it, and you definitely feel the heat when you're under those. Thankfully, those were not involved. But I got to keep some Warhammer TV dice, and they were not Chessex dice. They're actually made in-house by Games Workshop, and they don't roll poorly, which was weird because usually Games Workshop dice like roll like crap. They do. I played against Nick's Orcs and Goblins army. He wanted to use his Beastclaw Raiders army, but because of some sort of agreement or just how they do things in there, it was featured in a White Dwarf because it was so well painted, and he made all this background for it. He wasn't allowed to use it yet because it was coming out in the next month's White Dwarf. So he decided to frantically rebase like 140 goblins instead. And I played against a Moon Clan army, and we had a good time. That was certainly. I don't want to say it was a one-sided game, but I definitely knew what to go for in his army in terms of target priority. Yeah. And I think we called it after turn 3, but it was still pretty fun. I wanted to go to Warhammer World for a whole week just to kind of decompress, because I've definitely been I won't lie, I've been spread a little thin trying to provide and like get a lot of things going in the wider community, because some people will notice on Facebook there is a New Jersey Age of Sigmar community group with over 230 people. I can 230 people do not live in New Jersey and play Age of Sigmar. That's a combination of New England, New York, upstate New York City, North Jersey, South Jersey, Philadelphia, middle Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and South, and so forth. So I just wanted to, it was like my hobby vacation. And it was almost like an open day or like a games day, if anyone's been to those games days of old, where you get the panels and you get to go up to your favorite designer or your painter. You get like about 15 seconds with them. You get that advice that you hold on to for years, but they're probably not going to remember what they said to you the next day. So I went in there, like, even on the slow days, it's quiet. They Wednesdays are like their game days. Like you on Wednesday nights after 6 o'clock, there's probably about 150 people in there and just playing pickup games. And I was there to play on the Warhammer Twitch stream, and I was there for Warhammer World's Age of Sigmar Grand Tournament Heat 1. I had the opportunity to talk to pretty much everyone who works for the design studio because I was there for so long. They open at 10 o'clock in the morning, and there are certain things that fall below a certain threshold of security clearance that they're allowed to have meetings about it in Bugman's. So for those who are unaware, Bugman's is attached to Warhammer World, is a restaurant and pub called Bugman's Bar. They have a full menu of mini pizzas, burgers, breakfast, kids stuff. It's very family oriented. They have a microbrewery nearby that they buy from, and then they resell it as Joseph Bugman's XXXXXX. I didn't try it. I'm not really a beer person. I enjoy everything that isn't beer for the most part. That might be strange, but that's a thing for another day. I sampled the menu over the whole week. I got to talk to people. Some people have. I've had the grateful. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to have met them on more than one occasion. Most notably, Duncan. I think there is not one event that Duncan's been to that I've not also run into him. Him and I are kind of like on a first name basis. I don't want to brag. It's just like I've seen Duncan so many times. Like, oh, hey, Martin. I was definitely wanted to talk to his boss for the first time, Mr. Chris Peach, because I revere him like my most sovereign liege, my most gracious lord. Because he's definitely like the painting guru behind that cheeky smile and all the tea drinking. The only person I wish I had more time to talk to is a Mr. Darren Latham. He is the head judge for Golden Demon, and I believe the head of the Heavy Metal Studio Painters. And yeah, I met basically everyone else. In terms of information I got from them, it's not so much stuff that we haven't heard about already. I definitely don't want to get anybody in trouble by saying things that I think that they were implying. Because I also didn't really want to ask about stuff. It's like I do like the surprise of what comes next. I'm also pretty content with Stormcast. I mean, I did ask certain people. It's like, is Teclis coming? Is Teclis High Elves? Give me back my original love. But it was very good fun. I mean, we were in the middle of the Malign Portents hype and the Nurgle releases, so I did run into Phil Kelly. And Phil Kelly is one of those people that, you know, if he ever left Games Workshop, but he won't because he knows he has a good deal. He could probably make some sort of like he could probably start a new franchise that would be a hit the world over. The man is just filled with these ideas and theories and stories that I felt a lot more confident going back home that the Age of Sigmar narrative was in good hands just from talking to him for 5 minutes over 2 days. Yeah. And one thing I can say with certainty, which is like it's not necessary, it's not a secret, is for this past year and a half, they brought over a lot of the 40K staff to contribute to the design work behind Age of Sigmar's story and sculpting. So like Aaron Dembski-Bowden, which I know is a very much considered like the premier 40K author. He's written a lot of the background that's coming out now for Age of Sigmar. Phil Kelly, of course, as well, and Simon Grant. I'm not sure in what capacity. I didn't actually get to meet him, but I did see him walking around. So it does show that they've been able to dedicate a lot more time and effort than previously into the Age of Sigmar product.
Yeah,
it seems like
it seems like they're investing a lot more resources into AOS in general.
Yeah.
You sorry to interrupt. I was just going to ask. Do you know if Simon Grant does anything beyond the rules team now?
I wouldn't know. He was the only person I didn't get to ask about. I know certain people don't paint because just they don't have I'm not going to say they don't have the hobby ability. It's just not something they do.
Right.
So I wouldn't say he's one of the army painters. I know who all of the army painters are because I revere their work and try and aspire to that level, which is like just below or like a somewhat equivalent to the heavy metal thing or team. Like I would personally, based on my own opinions, consider that to be a stepping stone, only because I followed so many of the army painters, and you have to be part of the army painters to paint the armies and the dioramas that go into the codexes and battle tomes. You can graduate from that into the heavy metal team, and I know of 2 people who worked for the army painters who are or did now work for the heavy metal painting team, especially and she probably doesn't watch this, but I've laid a shout out anyway. Her name is Natalie Slynn. You can find her on Instagram, and she's just amazing stuff, like the true exemplar of like the Games Workshop painting style. And she recently got accepted into the heavy metals from army painters. Yeah, I got to talk to the Warhammer community people, the heavy metal team, Ben Johnson, who I believe is the creative director for Age of Sigmar overall, Jess Bickham, Pete Foley, I've met on more than one occasion. I think he's basically in charge overall of 40K and AOS. I think he's like called like the project director for books and boxed games, which they have some titles which don't necessarily allude to what they're directly in charge of. I talked to Joey Logan. People will remember Joey Logan as that video when they were testing out the rules for 8th edition 40K. They made that joke video. Joey Logan was the one in the lab coat who threw a drop pod at the table and destroyed it. Do you remember that video?
Vaguely.
Yeah. Duncan was walking. It's like we're looking at the new 40K rules. Let's see how it's going on. And Joey Logan's this guy with like this scraggly blonde hair like down to his shoulders. He's his glass, the security, the goggles, the lab coat. It's like we're testing out the new deep strike rules, and he chucks a drop pod at a table, and it shatters. He's in charge of paints, everything that isn't a miniature and isn't a book. So like all of the scenery, all of the paints, the painting guides, the primers. If there's a new paint that comes out, his team designed it, or rather they stole a mixture from the heavy metal team and decided to name it something weird and put it into the little chicken nugget pots.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him about.
My apologies. I was just going to say he also clearly has some design impact on the 40K orcs if he's chucking drop pods at a table.
Yes. I believe he designed the Sector Mechanicus stuff too. Well, there's a stream. If you go back in Warhammer TV's archives and type in his name, he's talked on there a few times about like the stuff he's helped design firsthand. And I think I talked to him about the bricks, because it's just like he's definitely like made it known to everybody that he scours the internet. And he watches basically whatever a fan puts out, like on YouTube or Facebook, or like he will scour social media looking at people's suggestions and ideas. He doesn't try to hide that from anybody. So I showed him my bases, and it's just like, oh look, there's an individual bricks. It's like, yeah, we could do that in AutoCAD. He took some pictures. He asked for me to send them to him on social media, and he might be having some meetings. So if in a year and a half Citadel bricks come out, we'll know where they came from. I thought that was pretty cool. And just to end the discussion about what I did at Warhammer World when I played at the GT, I won't lie, it was like the Olympics. Just from everybody being able to play more AOS competitively in a smaller space, because it is an island country, I feel like they force each other to up their game. And even when I was down in the middle of the pack, it was some of the roughest games I've ever played. Like even against unconventional armies, like I played against a full Wood Elf army for the first time, and that was just like neck and neck every turn. And they're just at the top tables, like 120 Fire Slayers, Change Hosts, Bone Splitters, 120 Fire Slayers, another Tzeentch army, Vanguard Wing, on top of these people being amazing painters, great people. And I was just like, almost felt like I was out of my league, but I had a great time. I was this close to winning 4 games. I won 2 games. So yeah. All right.
So that is, well, I want to say that's a good segue into our next thing, but I actually wanted to talk about your painting a little bit, because before we jumped on the stream, you were talking about it a little bit, that you paint kind of in ways that are like inspired by what the heavy metal team does.
Yeah, like what I'm working on right now, I don't know if the stream can see it. Can you guys see this okay?
Yeah, let me just log on for a second, and we can see it more clearly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's like, really cool. Yeah. This is Severin Steelheart from the Shadespire set. I'm painting him in a way that really tests my single miniature painting skills, because I just spent the past year and like a month. No, it was like about a year painting 40 Stormcast models. And I know I'm painting another Stormcast one, but this one isn't turquoise. But it was just like I lost a lot of I sacrificed a lot of sleep at just making sure that everything in that army was just perfect. People who follow me on social media, and some of you may have seen my army progress over the months, and it was just like nonstop turquoise armor, the gold, the white, and just I wanted to try. I wanted to try and win Best Painted at a Warhammer World event. I have done that once before, and I don't want to take away from that, but it was during the time period before Age of Sigmar had points. So the attendance of those events was not necessarily as full-bodied as events are now.
Right.
So winning Best Painted at a grand tournament with around 100 players versus a narrative tournament with about 22, 24 players, I felt was like my next step in terms of what I wanted to do. because Golden Demon has not been in the States since 2012. So I've been trying to test myself in painting armies to a high of a standard as possible. And that's like, I like the idea of competitively painting and playing at the same time. I don't like the idea of having to of choosing one or the other. And I think that's how I've kind of gained some notoriety in that, on my Instagram and social media, I'll post certain things that just like these new miniatures that I'm painting, but then all of a sudden, hey, I played a game, and it's with all of the miniatures I've painted so far, which I think look really nice, and I think it makes the games look all the better. Especially in some recent games, like last night I played against the new Death Book, and my friend who's a photographer who I was playing against took some really nice photos because his army happened to be painted, so was mine. And it came with it really does look very nice when both armies on the table are painted, even more so when they're painted to a very high standard.
Yes, definitely.
So what would you like me to talk about specifically?
I just want to go down a checklist real quick because it's just interesting to me, like people's different painting techniques, and I don't need to lock onto you anymore.
Okay.
They're locked onto you for some reason. But like, for example, like, do you airbrush your miniatures?
So I don't own an airbrush. So if we wanted to go down like a checklist or tenet of what I do, me specifically, one of my idols is a man by the name of Hayao Miyazaki, who created the Studio Ghibli films. He was always about making individual details, even small ones, personal. And he said something once that just gave me chills. It's just like the cool thing about animation is that everything that's on screen is there on purpose. So the more you look at something, the more you look at his films, the more you realize there are details in certain shots that you may not recognize, or even the camera doesn't want you to notice them, but they are there. Especially the panoramas can be ostentatious. And so my painting style tries to give breathing room on a miniature, the smaller details, which will fill it out. One thing I actually don't like painting are basic Space Marines, because basic Space Marines that come out of the box, you only get the armor and the bolter. And I prefer miniatures, especially fantasy miniatures, that have like the smaller details that fill them out. I like the more elaborate bases, so you get to have like this. You get this image that infers that there's more to the world outside of what you're seeing on the base in front of you. So my checklist would be: no, I don't airbrush. Make sure the smaller details are given their proper attention, like the leather straps, the belts. Maybe if there's like some detail on cloaks. For freehand, I have a rule of only ever use 2 colors, so that if you mess up, like drawing something like a symbol, you can go back with the background color and then just fix it. So like what I'm going to do tonight on Severin is I want to do some cloth trim. I'm going to sketch it out with a mechanical pencil, or in this case, just a regular pencil. And it's just white and blue. If I mess up the blue line, I'm going to fix it with white. If the white goes onto the blue, I'm just going to fix the blue lines. And I see sometimes people really go crazy on the flags for miniatures, like they'll draw like a scene. And in real life, no one does that. It's a lot of block, bold colors that you can see on the battlefield. And so I hold true that even on centerpiece models with flags, I try and keep it 2 block colors because it stands out more and it's easier to fix if you mess up. I go into a miniature thinking about the ways I can mess up and try and paint in such a way that will mitigate all of those like mistakes I could make. So for example, I paint in sub-assemblies when I can within reason, because I don't want to have to get my brush under someone's legs or on the back cloth like I did with Severin, because he has all of this cloth behind his legs, and I want to make sure I can get there with the proper amount of detail without having to hassle. Oh, I could get excess paint on his legs or on the stone that he's going to be standing on.
Yeah.
And
now, do you use like Zenithal highlighting? Is that on your?
So Zenithal highlighting involves. I think that might be something I can look into in the future, because the thing about Zenithal highlighting is that if you're painting Games Workshop models, it's probably not going to work out well, because Zenithal highlighting is effectively pre-shading. You're pre-shading a miniature, and then you're going to paint exclusively with glazes. I find that works best if you're painting a bust or maybe something monochromatic. If you're going to paint if you're painting like a Space Marine that has like a solid color, like as soon as you put that undercoat on, like if you okay, I'm gonna Zenithal highlight. Okay, he's an Ultramarine. I'm gonna undercoat McCrag blue, and now all of your Zenithal highlighting is gone. Yep. So it's Zenithal highlighting is best used if you take a picture of the miniature after you've Zenithal primed it and keep that as a reference. And then, like, if you print out that image, keep it next to your miniature at all times, and then you start painting it, because then you have a reference image for where the light is supposed to be hitting the miniature when you're painting it, because you're going to lose that as soon as you do the undercoat if you're painting miniatures in the Games Workshop style. And by Games Workshop style, I mean base coat, wash, layer, edge highlight. And that brings up another thing, the way that Games Workshop paints. And this is from me talking to the Heavy Metal team and just how they prefer to paint. The Games Workshop washes tend to not be used as frequently because they introduce a semi-gloss matte finish that just doesn't work. It introduces some sort of just inconsistent finish into the recesses that isn't necessary. So they just go back to this tried and true method of mixing darker colors. They never really use true black either. Like for black, one of the cool things about being on Twitter is a lot of the Games Workshop employees exist on Twitter because they find Facebook either too busy or too filled with vitriol. And if you just not even message, you just tag some of the heavy metal painters in a post and just say, hey, how did you paint this miniature? And they'll just give you the color recipe. That's worked for a few times for me. Like for their blacks, like for the Black Templar armor, or I guess Everchosen. Instead of going with pure black, they start with like Incubi Darkness, which is like this nice, really deep sea green. And they highlight up to Thunderhawk Blue, which is a mix. It's actually I have the paint in front of me. It's a blue, gray, green mix, and then they use Fenrisian Gray, which is the old Space Wolf's Gray, which is a very pale blue gray, and then maybe Ulthuron Gray, which is an off-white. They never go for pure white or pure black, and this is like a thing often done in art because you never want to start at those far end of white and black, because you want to be able to always use more contrast by mixing in darker paints. You can always go darker with your, say, the Incubi Darkness, for example. You can always add more black, but if you start at pure black, you can't go darker than that. Same with pure white. You can never go brighter than white, so you might as well start with an off-white and then maybe just go brighter than that, and it allows you more room to paint that contrast rather than starting you at those extremes. So I take in a lot of feedback for how I paint. I message a lot of individuals on Facebook, and just pull that feedback, almost like collecting cooking recipes. Just there's a million ways to make pasta. There's a million ways to make pasta sauce. You have to find the way that works for you and what you're happy with. And don't be afraid of feedback, and just pushing forward, using that feedback to improve in ways you do not expect. And I think that best sums up how I paint.
Nice. So, why don't we talk about, we had a nice segue opportunity before. Yeah. Now we're going to have to rough segue this. Yeah. The list that you brought to Warhammer World.
Yes.
You're running Stormcast.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about what list you brought and I know you kind
So-
of mentioned before that
Yeah.
you're thinking of retooling the list and
Yeah.
all of that, so we can certainly discuss all of that as well.
So I run what I like to call. So I like to paint models. I don't like to paint spam lists because if I kind of have painting ADD in that, like, I really don't want to paint a lot of the same miniature. Even and when if you say, well, you paint Stormcast, no, they're not all the same. So like if someone asked me to paint Vanguard Wing, I would probably just cheat and just spray them, wash them, do some min basing just to not just anything to get out of painting that. So I try and have lists where units do not often repeat. And so that leaves me with armies that I have to make competitive, because that means that there's probably not going to find a battalion that allows me to do stuff with it. And I have to rely on using only one of those units. So in my list, it's more of like a combined arms Stormcast army. We have what I like to call the Four Musketeers, which is your Lord Celestant, your Lord Castellant, your Lord Relictor, and your Knight Heraldor. I see them often, and some people may know of them. I give
That's
the
like a pretty standard suite of 4 heroes that you see in like almost every Stormcast list.
Yeah, because Stormcasts are kind of, I would like to say, equivalent to Skaven, in that they're not going to be amazing in combat, but they don't need to be. Their strength is in their utility to what they provide to the army. They just have great armor saves. So I here's what's going to be pretty standard. I give my Lord Celestant the Staunch Defender trait.
Yep.
I give my and I give him the Mirror Shield to just -2 to hit him with shooting attacks. And I give my Lord Relictor the Lightning Chariot Prayer, because I need that, especially for what I have in my list. And then I have 2 units of 5 Liberators. I gave them swords instead of hammers, mainly because they're usually off on their own. And when they're off on their own in a vacuum, the swords versus hammers are mathematically effectively the same. I know the hammers are better, but the swords, this is like more like the painting thing. People aren't used to seeing the swords. And I was just, you know what? Let's just do it. Hey. And it also, I painted my Stormcast like the Celestial Vindicators. Those are the Alpha Legion looking turquoise models with the white shoulders. They're all about swords over the hammers, so it kind of fit them a little better. And then I have a unit of 5 Judicators. And then I have a unit of 4 Fulminators, which is already a quarter of my army in one unit.
Yep.
And then a unit of 10 Retributors with 4 Star Soul Maces, about another quarter of my army in one unit. That is movement 4, which is why Lightning Chariot is so helpful.
Right.
And then where I really make it my own, I was playing around with the Vanguard Raptors for a little while right after the book came out. And I played about 30 games with them, and I decided that they weren't working in the list that I had. So I had around 320 points to play with, and I mulled over what I needed in the army. And I came to a conclusion that I think is sound for right now, or was, but it isn't for much longer. So I'm going to be changing these. But I had an Auric Rune Smiter on Magmadroth, and I had an Organ Gun. Now, on the stream, they played up that I had the Organ Gun because, well, Marty loves this Organ Gun so much. And that's true. And it has made its way into multiple army lists of mine in several events. I think it's probably one of the best war machines out there. It's probably undercosted, but I don't want to get that technical with reviewing it.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody
range.
that has gotten really technical with reviewing it, I mean, I think it's probably like fairly costed considering just how easy it is to take out the crit.
Yeah. And it can put out a lot of shots. And the cool thing is also Lightning Chariot. Not many people know this, but the Lightning Chariot prayer does not work on just Stormcast units. You have to be Stormcast Allegiance to take the prayer to begin with. But at one point in time, I used Lightning Chariot on the Organ Gun to teleport it 24 inches and I then had the organ gun within line of sight to a model that was behind blocking line of sight terrain, and I was able to snipe a character using the organ gun that way. And someone was just like, "Wait, here's just an organ gun just shooting across the table." That's something you see every day. And I took the Auric Rune Swipe.
I wonder if that actually works, because technically, I believe, like
It is legal.
The crew has a separate profile.
It counts as one war scroll. It is one unit. War machines
so the
are
whole
weird.
thing goes, even though the crew are sort of separate from the war machine.
Correct. So war machines, because Age of Sigmar has one core rule sheet that can't address individual special rules, where war machines should be addressed.
Yes.
They have to put everything on the war scroll. You can target the crew separately. The crew have their own attacks and wounds profile, but they are treated as one unit for purposes of unit coherency and deployment. So when you use Lightning Chariot on the organ gun, the crew goes with it.
Yep.
That's mean.
So it's a thing. But ultimately, it's very easy to take out. And when my opponents have war machines, I take it out the same way they do. One of the cool things about if people are struggling with war machines in their games and are playing Stormcast, I recommend just using the Scions of the Storm ability on a unit of Judicators, and you drop them in front of your opponent's war machine and just shoot the crew.
Yep.
Done. That happens to me. I have a good player, like depending on who I play against and what army they have, I probably have a 50% chance of losing my organ gun the first turn. It is what it is. But if they're shooting at my organ gun, they're not shooting at the stuff that is more important, which brings me to my Auric Rune Smiter on Magmadroth. Now, I racked my brain and looked through all of the war scrolls in the order Grand Alliance for what I needed in my army to take to to fill these 200 points. And they were replacing a unit of Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows. So the Auric Rune Smiter has 12 wounds. It's a hero. It moves 12 inches, and it shoots mortal wounds. So I was just looking at, based on those principles alone, only for 200 points. Wow. And then in close combat, it bleeds if it takes damage, which is mortal wounds. It has a tail whip, which automatically hits larger units, which does mortal wounds. I'm all about putting more mortal wound output into my army. Paul, as you well know, I can put out a lot more mortal wounds than a Vanguard Wing army can.
That's the one thing that, at least from sitting across the table from that army, it feels like the overall theme of it is virtually every model you put on the table can do mortal wounds.
Yeah,
and that's huge in and of itself. Like conceptually, that's like everything that you throw at your opponent is a huge threat.
Mm-hmm. Even I do exaggerate a little bit because I put so many points into very low model count units, in that half of my army is 14 models, which have no protection against mortal wounds. So against Tzeentch armies, I really, really struggle, especially if they build their army right and they know how to play against Stormcast. Stormcast have very good offense, exceptional defense, but very low health and no protection against magic. When someone brings a magic army, it's like, oh yeah, I can cast 9 spells a turn. What wizards do you have in your army or unbinds? I just I don't have any. I'm done. Or I'm not done, but I mean, it's just I'm not going to stop your magic phase. But once I get going, it's okay. And you're, I believe at a recent 2-day event that I went to, which is called The Boys, which is the one Paul attended as well. In one of my games, in one turn, I believe I did around 37 mortal wounds across one game turn. And yeah, it gets a little extreme.
Because that felt like that might have been against me.
No, it wasn't. No, I wish, but
I was hoping it was.
No, it was actually against my the first player I played at the event. But he had chaos, so it's like, oh, I'm gonna take the shields didn't help because chaos warriors have their shields that protect against mortal wounds.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, you're taking 20, so your unit's dead. Like roll unless you roll like 9 5+, which you're not going to. But what I've run into now, if we're going to talk about the list changes, is that I put the Magma Droth in the army because it looks cool. It's kind of fits my theme of being somewhat Asian looking from like the bases and the display board and like the Chinese writing I have on lots of the shields. It's like this big. It was like this big red Chinese dragon. I put like this monk on top. And I felt like it thematically fit, and I made the most out of the 200 points. And I got to add the organ gun. It was just like, yeah, I got to get the organ gun on my 3rd tournament list again. But I think the better use of the points is a Frost Phoenix. I'm sorry, an Anointed of Azarian on Frost Phoenix. I think they're still called Anointed of Azarian. They might just be called Anointed, but that's a tangent. That has it's a hero that also moves 12 inches. It has a 4+ ward save. Effectively, they're not called ward saves anymore, but that already means it's a hero in my army that has protection from magic. And if my opponent has an absurdly long magic phase, every time a wizard casts a spell within, I believe it's 12 inches. It might be longer. I think it's 12 inches. On a 2+, the bird gets +1 to its armor save until that person's next hero phase. So if my opponent, if I'm playing against Nagash and Nagash is casting 8 spells, and he tries to roll up to my Frost Phoenix has a 1+ armor save. So have fun with that. And one of the other themes of my army overall is that combined with Staunch Defender, the Lantern, I can get my unit of Fulminators to a 1+ armor save. They get +1 from Staunch Defender, +1 from the Lantern, and if you're shooting them with the shooting attack, Fulminators have this base rule where they get another +1 to their armor save against shooting attacks. So for purposes of Rend, I have a 0+ armor save, and that hasn't been seen since the days of old Warhammer Fantasy, and certainly not in a good guy army. So I just love watching people roll their eyes when it's like, oh yeah, take these at Rend 2. So 2+ rerollable? Because Fulminators have just as a base 3+ rerolling 1s. So my goal is to put out a lot of mortal wounds every turn, hit them with my most powerful units, which are the Retributors and the Fulminators, and control the rest of the table with movement shenanigans. And in the future, use the Frost Phoenix and another Lord Relictor to bank on debuffs to like just hand out lots of -1 to hits, and the aura from the Frost Phoenix, which is the -1 to wound when it is undamaged within 9 inches of it. And I think that's
real quick.
Yeah.
I want to say I think that your actual goal is not what you said. It's to crush your opponent psychologically to where they break down and cry because they can't do anything on the table, and then you know you truly won.
Hopefully that hasn't happened yet. I mean, yeah. I mean, I lost last night, so yeah, I lost to death by 1 point on Scorched Earth. But that was just we were both learning the game at the same. We were both learning the book at the same time.
Yeah, but that's also one Ray's roll being better or worse, so it's practically a draw at that point.
Yeah. I mean, he's still a good player. My friend Nick, these are the New York City club. They have this thing where they play on Thursdays, and it was I drove up from Delaware just so I could play with them for like one Thursday. It's a bit of a trek, but I've kind of been known to do that.
Yeah,
no tournament is too far. I drove to Midwest Meltdown once, and that is in Peoria, Illinois, which is about 13 hours from my apartment, but I did it.
Props.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Paul, you wanted to talk about the Maggotkin and the Nagash book and what your thoughts were about them in the meta?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing that is that sort of list that you're talking about with Stormcast, I think that is going to be more viable overall now with the Magakin book and the Legions of Nagash book. Both of those are, you have some level of magic resistance. Like Nurgle has it from, all of the ward saves on all the demons, and all the death stuff has some combination of some kind of ward save, even if it's like a 6-up, and you have tons of powerful magic of your own that you're potentially unbinding things with Nagash at like a +5 or something like that with the right combinations of things. I mean, like Tzeentch is going to be able to like push through a couple of spells maybe with Destiny dice, and then they just have to outroll you on really high unbinds.
Can I point out that on the new Death book, it's like Death doesn't care about mortal wounds, right? Like Death has in essence, a ward save, but because of all the new ways with the grave sites and the heroes to like regen so many units, they can heal so fast that 5 mortal wounds, 6 mortal wounds in a turn. If that's all you're really outputting, Death doesn't care about that because that comes back next turn easy.
Well, I would just be a little hesitant to say that the units may not care.
Right.
But one thing that Death's weakness, which I think they definitely, I'm not going to say they didn't address, but I think they wanted the core mechanic of the army, is that most of your characters, unless you're running Nagash or a Vampire Lord and a Zombie Dragon, most of your characters are going to be very fragile.
Oh, absolutely.
And they are actually more vulnerable to magic now. All of the more reason to go after them because they are more important to the army than they have ever been, because they took away the ability for models to heal from the banners and put that on the characters. And the last thing you want as a player, as a Death player, is to keep playing your heroes defensively because you're just trying to keep them from getting sniped. And I mean, it's like if you're running Archon, or if you're running Necromancers, it's just like, well, if they're staying at the back of the table and I only have to fight the chaff, or if I only have to fight the units right now, that's a quarter of your army, maybe more. It's not directly engaging me. And I feel like that's something Death has to look out for, is that as Tzeentch is always going to be the most powerful. It might not have the most powerful wizards, but it's going to have the most powerful magic phase because of Destiny dice, and it can field more wizards as units with the horrors and everything. And I just think, especially like if you can think about, I think the base Lord of Change ability is whenever someone casts a spell, I get that spell. I think that's how it works. Or is it whenever I successfully unbind a spell, I get it? Paul?
I do not recall. I am sad to say I've actually never had to play against Tzeentch before. There's like nobody around here that is playing Tzeentch. So
in the Northeast, it's definitely, because I talked to some of the guys that like the Adepticon staff, the LVO guys, and just like the Northeast. I don't want to say anything to our detriment. It's just, well, fewer people play Age of Sigmar in our region of the country. And because of that, you're just going to run into something where people just don't necessarily have to play the meta, or they feel like playing something else. And if they feel like playing something else, you won't see as many Tzeentch players. And that's why you don't see as many Fire Slayers. You don't see as many Tzeentch players at our local 2-day events because of that. It's not a bad thing. It's just by the numbers. So yeah, one day it'll happen. If you're going to Adepticon, it'll happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you going to Adepticon?
I am not going to Adepticon this year.
Right.
I am going to come down to New Jersey for Triumph, and I'm going to head out to Pennsylvania for Keystone.
They removed Age of Sigmar from Keystone yesterday, unfortunately. They are
really?
not. Yeah, they don't have enough interest for the event.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah. They will be doing Kings of War, Blood Bowl, and Malifaux for that same weekend, though.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder how much. how much Kings of War has to do with Age of Sigmar not having enough interest, because there's a lot of overlap there seems between Kings of War players and AOS players.
Kings of War is really strong out there. I haven't really played it at all, but if you go to Crossroads, which is a tournament in upstate New York, it's have you heard of it? Crossroads?
Yeah, when is Crossroads going to be?
It's probably September.
Yeah, I'll probably instead then.
Yeah, well, Crossroads for Age of Sigmar, like we'll see. But Kings of War is definitely an event that you go to Crossroads or Keystone for, because they Kings of War is definitely their thing out there. So I think it would probably be true to say that they have overlap of players.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it's mainly trying.
New England as well. Like the Unplugged GT, like that whole crew that was running that, they all went to Kings of War, and Unplugged is just Kings of War now.
Yeah, I went to the last Fantasy GT for Unplugged.
Yes, that is actually like 10 minutes from my house, by the way.
Oh wow! 6 hours for me.
Yep.
Well, it was 6 hours because I drove on a Friday night in April, so I had to drive through all of the rush hour through New York, through the Cross Bronx, and up the I-95 corridor along. Yeah.
Like,
oh well,
one of the 5 worst pieces of highway in the country. Yeah, that.
Yes. But yeah. So it's players should always think about what they see in their region versus what they might see internationally or in national events. I don't want to say list. I don't want to say list tailor, but you shouldn't worry about playing against 120 Fire Slayers if no one at your local club or the club in the town next to you, no one feels like painting 120 naked dwarves.
Yeah. I mean, locally, I would say players around here are like, I'm worried about like KO. There's multiple KO armies floating around here.
I have never I have never played against one, but that's neither here nor there.
They suck big time.
Yep.
It's like their shooting phase can be absolutely brutal, and then they just zip line in their little steampunk space marines with chain swords and rip through your ship at Ren 2, which is just, like, not cool at all.
They're shooting attacks, right?
Yeah.
Pollinators like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What else do we have a lot of around here?
A lot of chaos because
yes,
just the Northeast in general. It's like what it's chaos and orcs. Go for the big bad guys that hit stuff hard. It's just what it is.
Yeah, definitely a lot of chaos overall. I mean, I've seen a lot of Khorne armies on the table, and there's definitely a few Nurgle people floating around. There's a bunch of Stormcast. But yeah, stuff that I like never see is like Fire Slayers, Tzeentch. I've played against Death once. There's certain things.
Everyone bought the Death book or by me. They sold out at like half of the game stores.
Yep.
Or like the day really sold out, as in like the stuff they had in stock just went.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. It's it's a very tempting book.
Yeah.
So with your army,
yes,
like what are you thinking are the changes you're thinking of making?
So I was talking about the Frost Phoenix. So I just want to get rid of the I had the opportunity to talk to the individual, blanking on his name now, which I apologize, but I believe he was on your show, who won the Australia GT, CanCon. I believe it's Adam something.
Yeah.
he was running the epitome of what I like to call the Stormcast debuff army, which is multiple units of Fulminators, multiple units of Tempesters. Tempesters, for those unaware, are the Stormcast on Dracoths with crossbows. Now, the rule of thumb is if it's a crossbow in a Stormcast, it must be terrible, because they usually are. But the main ability they have is if they so much as target a unit with their shooting attacks, and every model in the unit has to target the same unit with this rule, they are at -1 to hit in shooting in close combat until my next turn. And I don't have to do a wound. It's called suppressive fire. And it's okay, you're -1 to hit. And then he has 2 of them. So he has 2 units of 2 of them, which have 10 wounds, a 3+ save, re-rolling 1s, and they movement 10. So he just goes around. It's like you're -1 to hit, you're -1 to hit. He has 2 Lord Relictors in the unit in the army, and they have the base Reliquary Staff, which has on a 12 inches, 3+, take D3 mortal wounds, and you're at -1 to hit and shooting in close combat until my next hero phase. And they both have Lightning Chariot. So it's like, okay, so I have 2 of those, 2 units of 2 Tempestors. So at any given time, he's just handing out all of these -1 to hits, and that's big. A lot of stuff that does extra damage if you roll a 6 to hit, that no longer happens. Oh, you get +1 to hit just from stuff which increases, makes your math better. That no longer happens. So for me, I didn't want to go to a place where I had to rethink the army. I feel like the army overall, with all of the games I've played with the Retributors, the Fulminators, the characters, I only wanted to make minor tweaks. I didn't want to just completely redo it. So I'm dropping the Magmadroth and the Organ Gun, which I knew were fluff, and I'm putting in the Anointed of Azarian on Frost Phoenix and a second Lord Relictor with Lightning Chariot. Now, with 2 Lightning Chariots, I'm more likely than not going to zip around the board. If I need Retributors to get up the table early and I fail to cast it once, I am less likely to fail the second time. And the Anointed on Frost Phoenix is just handing out a -1 to wound on top of everything else. And more specifically, how it helps in scenario play, my army really suffers in the scenario of Duality of Death, where you have the 2 objective markers in the center. That was the one we played. Yep. And if someone has the ability to get to them immediately, like if they're playing in the Gash list, or if they're playing with 2 Maw Crushers, for example, or just 2 monsters in general, they're allowed to fly up, and they control those objectives from turn 1. And I only have infantry characters, usually. So I have to fight to get them off the objectives and then to score. And at that point, I'm scoring too late in the game for it to matter. So with a Frost Phoenix, it has a ward save, so I can just run up there and start controlling an objective early. And I have the durability to last more than 1 turn with it. So that's my reasoning behind my list changes.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, like, the difference between what you're running versus, like, that debuff list is basically swapping out your Retributor for Tempesters.
Yes.
They're the same points.
Yes, they are. Yeah, because 2 units, a unit of 10 is 440. It's a little cheaper, but yeah. He also has more Judicators in there. I like trying to spend a little less on core troops in an elite army, because I'm already spread thin for models as it is, making the units that I have effective. I'm not going to... If I'm going to take the risk of not having a lot of shooting, I feel like just strategically, I shouldn't try and mitigate my lack of shooting. Like, most of the shooting in my army now just is mortal wound shooting rather than any regular shooting. So it's like, I think I'm good.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree with that. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, the different kind of like balance of lists that you can make with Stormcast. What I've really likened them to is what Free Guild was before GHB 2017. You know, more elite version of the same thing, which is really what's attracting me to that army, because
I feel like more army
is just like not that interesting to me anymore.
Nah. They are a gunline army, and I don't think gunline armies work in this game.
Right.
Because your plan is to shoot a thing, and if that doesn't work, you shoot it some more, but if you can't, you lose.
Yep.
I feel like more armies should be like Stormcast in that you should be able to have a diversity of builds even for outside of competitive play, because nothing works more selling stuff to customers than, well, you can build whatever you want with this army. I mean, my personal opinion is most of the stuff that came out last year, like the Vanguard models, are not great. I see people winning with them. Apparently, like in New Zealand, they're all about, I'm going to put 2 units of Paladors in my army. And I'm like, I don't get that at all. But I don't think like that. So if I don't understand that, doesn't mean it's not good. But somebody is out there using them. I don't think they're great. But you still have so many options.
They're missing a piece. They're missing something, and I can't even quite put my finger on what it is. But they just don't quite make it to what you really want.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm painting. When I paint, I don't.
The Chocobo Riders, right?
Yeah, They are 220 points for 3, and they should not cost that much.
Yeah, I think at least for me, the thing that was missing for them when I look at them compared to the Dracoths is survivability. Like the Dracoths are beefy.
So a unit of 3 Chocobos costs the same amount as 5 Retributors. And in 5 Retributors, sure, they're movement 4, but they can take 2 Star Soul Maces, so they already have tremendous mortal wound output on top of their hammers. And so they have the same save, same amount of wounds, but you get so much more damage for what the Chocobos do. Yes, it's Ren 2, but it's only guaranteeing 1 wound of damage.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, their stat line is not that much different than Demigryph Knights.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you really, are they really justified being 60 points more than Demigryphs when they're very, very similar?
Yeah. I mean, they've Ren 2. Yay.
On their claw attacks.
Yes.
Right, which is just not that exciting.
Mm-hmm. I always feel bad bashing a Stormcast unit because there are people out there who play elves, and some people just don't have stuff. Period. But
yeah, I don't feel that bad. I mean, have you ever been on the receiving end of a high elf bolt thrower with a lore master casting its spell on it?
Yes.
Yeah, and that sucks pretty bad, doesn't it?
Not when they make the mistake of targeting my fulminators.
Well, yeah, that's.
I know.
That's a different story
cheeky.
altogether.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm ready for the elves, so they can all rot.
I'm waiting for High Elves to come back. I'm going to get right on that bandwagon. I'm going to write my resignation letter to Sigmar Heldenhammer, resigning as his consigliere. I'm going to put on my Techless hat, and I'm going to be that one person at a tournament. It's like, I hope they give him a ward save. Like, one of the things I'm worried about with the new Daughters of Cain book is that Olariel is a beautiful model, and she can do a lot, but the fact that she doesn't have a ward save of any kind means that she has no protection from mortal wounds, and she has no protection from rend, meaning that she often dies in combat, and where the other big models don't. Yeah. So I feel like it's a shame that I wish I saw her in competitive play more often. And I hope that the elves like Morathi, which we know is coming soon, and then eventually Tyrion, Teclis, and Malekith now remain Malarian for copyright reasons. I hope they are competitive enough and they give them the right stats to make sure that they see play at tournaments. Because I'm going to try my hardest to make sure when Teclis comes out, I'm gonna play that list into the ground. But if it doesn't have a ward save, it's not going to be good.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, total tinfoil hat speculation, right? But are you on the same train that I am? That it feels like if the predictions are right that we're getting another elf army this year, which I think PW has basically said we are.
Yeah. All right. So
it seems like it makes sense that we would have a shadow elf army, and then we would have a light elf army.
So I was only aware of, from what I was told from certain people who I will not name, that the Dark Elf army the Daughters of Cain army has been done for quite some time, and they just didn't know when to put it into the release schedule. And this was confirmed in that people who are very keen, like there's this giant chart somewhere on the internet with all of the rumor spoilers, like the images and what they correspond to. In the trailer for Daughters of Cain, one of the witch elf characters has the little dragon on her arm, and it was a spoiler from like last February, and it was painted in that image. So it just kind of proves that this army has been on the books for a while.
Yeah.
So I was told about it for a while now, like I want to say since like August, that this elf army has been done. We're just waiting for the right time to put it out. I didn't really know what that meant. Is there another elf army coming? I was not at Las Vegas Open to ask the right questions. If they say one is coming, another one is coming. Will it be Tyrion and Teclis or something like them? I honestly don't know. I usually go by, are the clues in the fluff? And there haven't been that many. I will have to go read the Nagash book. I know there's a silhouette of Morathi in the Nagash book, but other than that, I kind of missed it.
Yep.
I will enjoy the idea of being pleasantly surprised by something, because as much as we want to know about what's coming next, I think that's actually a curse, because if Games Workshop sent you an email tomorrow telling you exactly what comes out for the next 6 months, and you don't want what's coming out in the next 6 months, you're immediately disenfranchised. So it's like, well, I know it's coming, and it's not what I want, so I'm just going to wait. You know what I mean? You hold your wallet.
Yep.
You're not as excited, and I think that's ultimately bad for everybody. So,
yeah,
I would like it to be. I mean, like, I hope it's not another army that I want, because I just spent all of past year painting Stormcast, and if I get another army, that just means, oh great, I'm now going to lose my soul and my free time painting this frantically for some event.
Yeah.
So to answer your question succinctly, maybe.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well,
yeah. So but getting back to Stormcast, I was really like, I had never looked at the War Scrolls closely enough to see that Stormcast debuff list existed.
Yeah.
And I was really pleasantly surprised to be like, oh, there's this sort of mid-rangey Stormcast list that might be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really something that I've been looking for. Like, I just wanted a Stormcast list that was just a well-balanced, all-comers, combined arms list that worked.
Yeah. The thing about the best way to look at Stormcast is, do I want a battalion list or do I not want a battalion list?
Mm-hmm.
And my opinion of battalions is that ultimately you're paying points for something that isn't a model. It doesn't get to make attacks. So really, what good is it? In already an army that's strapped 4 miniatures to have a board presence. So if you don't take a battalion, that's free models. And I didn't think the abilities were good enough. That list that did win the tournament, I still don't like Tempesters, because if you're taking 240 points in 2 models just for that one special rule, I feel like you can better spend those points elsewhere. Granted, the Dracoths are just as good in combat. They have the same breath weapon as the Fulminators, which is probably the best breath weapon in the game. But I still don't like them.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can do better with the Frost Phoenix and just how I play. And that's just my opinion. That's why I've always seen that Tempesters would be amazing if you could take just one of them. Because if you could just have that one model, like then it's only 120 points. Then you're effectively paying for a character. But I think they were wise, balancing wise, that you had to take them a minimum of 2. It's also why you don't see Varangard very much, because Varangard costs the same amount as Dracothian Guard, but you have to take 3 of them. And because you have to take 3 of them, they're no longer worth it.
Yeah. They're steep. But they're good.
Mm-hmm. And I wish Everchosen was better, because that's something that everyone wants to contemplate, because it's like, well, Archaon's the big bad he's the supervillain of Age of Sigmar. Why doesn't he see more play? Because he can barely get into combat because he's too large.
Yeah.
Have you ever kited Archaon? Either of you?
No.
I have played against Archaon.
Mm-hmm.
And I played against him with free people, and I got into combat with him, got him down like halfway in one turn, and then the turn was going to roll back over to me, and the round of the tournament just ended. So I wasn't able to do it, but I was like, he was going to get dropped like a rock.
Wow. I've never managed to kill him. I think his weakness is you have to exploit his base size, and just feed him nothing, like, or just chaff, and that's the only way I think I could kill him. Because or just use Wrathmongers. I have run tournaments where, for those who don't know, Wrathmongers have this ability where if you kill one in close combat, they pick an enemy model within 2 inches of the model that was slain, and they get to control that model and make attacks either against itself or against enemy models. So Archaon attacks himself, and he has the Slayer. He has the Slayer of King's sword. If he rolls, I believe, 2 6s to wound, that model that hero dies. So if he rolls 2 6s to wound against himself, he commits seppuku, and just like, oh, he's dead. He's deceased.
That's
and
amazing.
All I heard was the no. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah. Other things that are really bad for Archaon: blocks of 20 handgunners.
How?
Hitting and wounding on 2s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's just so disappointing that they have like a 16-inch range, and like they lose so many buffs if they move, and like, yeah.
Well, that's realistic, isn't it?
A whole video like for like an hour on my disappointments of where Free Guild is currently. But I feel like they are always like with the General's Handbook coming out every year now. I feel like they're always just the next General's Handbook away from being good.
My opinion of Free Guild is that ultimately this is a fantasy war game.
Yep.
And regular humans with realistic medieval weapons will always be mediocre in a game with undead paladins, orcs, chaos, and fantasy monsters.
And let's be fair, they're not even really medieval. They're more of like colonial era.
Yeah, like Tudor. But still, it's still not good enough when everyone else has more powerful things. So
yeah,
that's just my opinion. Like, I don't think they have an incentive to give, like, if they come out with new stuff for free peoples, it's not going to be medieval looking. Like, they might give them more chocobos. Like, if you've noticed from when they made the changeover to the first General's Handbook, most of the models which were regular humans on horseback went out of production. Empire doesn't have knights. I'm trying to think of, like, they only have outriders. Like, there is I can't think of a human on a horse with a lance that is not the Free Guild General on Griffin. Not a Free Guild General on horse. Like, elves have the Dragon Princes. there's Chaos Knights, and that's it. Like everything else is like it's a light cavalry model. Like horses, there's like this conspiracy to get rid of horses from the mortal realms because they're not magical enough. So like if free people
definitely brought that up before, that it feels like they're trying to get horses out of the game.
Yeah. Because it's not fantasy enough. Like, would you rather ride a horse, or would you rather ride a bird dog that can be colored whatever you want?
Right.
Like it's not just intellectual property. It's also a matter of color theory as advertising. In that, if we show you that you can paint every aspect of this model any color, I think they think they can sell more of it, and I think that's true.
Yep. I mean, I think they have a lot of very easy design space to work with in Free Guild. I mean, how easy is it to give the Dracothian Guard treatment to demigriffs?
What do you mean?
Not hard, right? You can easily add one sprue to the box. You can make a hero, guys with crossbows.
They probably won't even do that. They like Beast Claw Raiders. They made like 9 War Scrolls out of one box.
Yeah.
They would rather just do that. It's like, oh, that's just too much work. Like the new death units. Yeah. One is just a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon without a helmet. And then one is the Coven Throne, built a little differently in the front and with just one vampire on it, and it's a completely new unit.
Yep. The vampire just kicked off her freeloaders. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's lazy, but it's effective because now it completely changes what it does with Games Workshop having to do nothing to the kit.
Yep.
So, and the other thing that I think they're alluding to is that because the realms are so vast narratively, I think that free peoples might need to be bigger than just Empire, and that there might be a table for like, well, what realm do they hail from? What kind of weaponry do they use? It might end up being like Imperial Guard, which I think is what they want, where it's like you really have a diverse fighting style based on their environment rather than options from them having a tactical versatility, I think is the right way to approach it. So I really couldn't even come to a guess what they want to do there. And of course, if you ask at a convention, Pete Foley will just smile and say, we'll look into that.
Yeah. And basically, I mean, I think it was at LVO, maybe.
Yeah.
Like the last time they did a panel and somebody asked them about humans, they were basically like, we really haven't figured out what we're doing with humans yet in the mortal realms. Like, we don't know what they really look like beyond, the stuff that we already have out there.
Yeah. And that's the same thing can be said with elves, because as much as certain decisions may or may not have been made by the core design team to switch from the old world to Age of Sigmar, they're using it now as an opportunity to break away from being a Tolkien clone. And there is nothing more Tolkien than elves.
Yeah.
So how do we make elves our own? And that's a really difficult. Yeah, and that's really difficult to do.
Yeah. And I think that's everybody goes to the whole intellectual property, capitalism bad line about Games Workshop and what they're doing with the story. Like, I think they're just trying to do their own thing and be original.
Yeah. Because fantasy was the less original thing of the two. And if you think about it, what would you say is the mascot for Warhammer Fantasy? Like, clearly now it's Stormcast. What was it in Warhammer Fantasy? What do you think?
Christ, I don't even know. Like, there was maybe Chaos Warriors.
So on most of the product imagery for Warhammer in wider media, it would have 5 or 6 different people from representing various races, because it was supposed to be like D&D, like Lord of the Rings, where you'd have a high elf, a dark elf, an orc, empire priest, and a chaos warrior fighting each other on the same screen. Meanwhile, for 40K, it was always Space Marines. That proved to be a very potent marketing tool. And it's like it or not, if it works, Games Workshop's like, well, let's just put them into fantasy. They made them tasteful, but it serves the same purpose. Right. And yes, they could have picked one race, but then most of the races out there that isn't chaos feel too Tolkien. So they wanted something that was original and that they could market properly. And now they're trying to do the same thing with all of the other races. I mean, the copyright stuff is like, well, elves are now elves. We just put an A in front, but the A is silent. That's copyright stuff. Renaming Malekith Malarian just because Marvel has a more popular Malekith. I think the rule internally is if you type in a name for a Games Workshop thing, we want it to be the first result that comes up. So Malekith, if you type in Malekith, it's the bad guy from Thor. It's not Mr. Dark Elf. So now we're going to call him Malarian because that we want to control what comes up in your internet search results.
Ironically, both Malekiths are dark elves, but
yes, which probably inspired them in the first place, I guess.
Yeah, I think there is a problem in general in the fantasy genre of like nobody's really done much all that original since Tolkien. Yeah. You know, like D&D copied everything Tolkien did. Like Warhammer's copied everything Tolkien did. A lot of other fantasy genre things have just copied the same shit over and over and over again. And at some point, somebody's going to say, like, screw it. We have to explore new space. We have to create something new. And with Age of Sigmar, I feel like they had like a really good opportunity to be like, okay, we created a whole new universe. We're porting over like the old stuff as sort of like a basis, like a baseline for what the new stuff is, but we have a whole new world to create. And we're actually going to go be creative with it.
Yeah, I think that's what they're doing. And I just was talking yesterday that Games Workshop has gone to great lengths and made some smart compromises to make Age of Sigmar the most accessible game of the core boxed games they offer. I'm not saying it's simple. It might come across as simple because they want it to be the gateway game. They want it to be like, you might stick with Age of Sigmar, or you might graduate from Age of Sigmar to 40K. But it's like they wanted it to be the gateway game. There is a reason Age of Sigmar rules are free. All the unit entries are free, and for 40K it's not. There is a reason there is no core rulebook for Age of Sigmar, and there is one for 40K. It's not because, well, 40K is our baby. We want to make sure the rules are right. They have effectively the same rules. Like they use the Age of Sigmar rules for 40K. They just kept a few stats, and they added some more special rules. But you still have to pay more money to get a 40K army than you do an Age of Sigmar army because most of your rules are free.
Right.
There's a reason there's an app with all of the unit entries in it where you can't get that for 40K. There's a reason there is an army builder that is free on Warhammer Community blog that 40K doesn't have.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the size of the 40K model line has something to do with that as well. Like Age of Sigmar is a lot. It started out a lot smaller, and they're continuously adding to it, but it's much more manageable than the 40K model line is.
Yeah. Especially since they decided to get rid of all of the older Finecast stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, like that or not, like I can't begin to understand why they got rid of Tomb Kings versus Bretonnia. Bretonnia, I can understand why they got rid of it because it was clear for some years that they just didn't know how to make Bretonnia their own. I mean, Someone could say, well, they could have done this and this. Well, clearly, the Games Workshop guys didn't think of that, and they didn't think of that for years, so off it went. But Tomb Kings, I don't want to pretend to speculate why they got rid of Tomb Kings. I mean...
I think it was just too similar to the direction they were going in with Death, of the rest of the vampire count stuff. Like, too many of the units overlapped.
Yeah. In my opinion, now I'm actually going to speculate, but I know I don't want to, but it did make in the end, two factions going away did make the miniatures range more manageable.
Yes.
And now they add to it in ways that I don't think they can do in 40K. I always bring up what happens when they run out of factions to update. You get something like Kharadron Overlords. Kharadron Overlords is something that no faction, it contains 0 models from existing factions. And it's completely new to the Warhammer lore. And they get to write it.
Like Fire Slayers were taking the old Dwarf Slayers and building a faction out from them.
Just like Daughters of Cain.
Nothing like Kharadron Overlords in any of Warhammer ever.
Yeah. And Daughters of Cain and Daughters of Cain takes that same thing. We're going to take the Witch Elf and we're going to build a whole new army based around that aesthetic.
Yep.
Right. And the Iron Jaws were, let's take Black Orcs and build an army around that aesthetic.
And by the way, now that I'm on YouTube again, I'm just going to take the opportunity to just say my one conspiracy theory about Iron Jaws. People are wondering what happened or who the orc god is, like the deity that controls the realm of beasts. All I'm going to say is, if you look at the miniature for Gordrak, the Fist of Gork, and you put him next to a model of Grimgor Ironhide, you'll notice the scar, the gash in his head, his broken teeth, the jewelry, and his eyes are the same. It's almost exactly the same face. I'm just saying, maybe Grimgor Ironhide survived the end times in a way you did not expect. That's all I'm going to say about that. Tinfoil hat off. Yeah. I was not the person who discovered that. When I was at Warhammer World a few years ago, like probably a year into Age of Sigmar, one of the guys who works the floor at Warhammer World, he's known for having Warhammer conspiracies for both 40K and Age of Sigmar. He's a very awesome guy, and he was just standing there for like an hour, just telling me, it's just like, hey, did you notice this? Did you notice this? And then I started seeing that. I posted that as a thread on the Age of Sigmar fan networks group about a few months ago, and I think the top comment was, "You're racist, Marty. Why do you think all orcs look the same?" And that was yeah. So it's just like, damn it, my conspiracy. It might be it might be a thing. But
this might be
black orcs.
I think your conspiracy is probably correct, and I think honestly the new Nagash book kind of gives it some more credence, because if you read the fluff in the new Legions book, it talks about Nagash whenever the Sigmar creates the new realms, and he has all the other gods of death, that Nagash hunts down all the other gods and basically consumes them to make himself the one and only deity of death.
Yeah.
And
so
I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see similar storylines with some of the other ones. Not necessarily that they hunt them down and consume their power, but that we take these characters that were the end times champions, and they are the new pantheon for Sigmar.
Yeah. So we saw pretty clear evidence of that when this game first came out.
Yep.
That models that were in the end times, avatars of the winds of magic, if they held a wind of magic at a certain point in time, they were resurrected, or they survived through their own magic, the apocalypse. They survived across the cosmos, which, as we know, includes from the primer rulebook, Tyrion, Teclis, Malekith, Morathi, Sigmar, Archaon, Alariel, Gorka Morka, Grimnir, Grungni, and Nagash. In the end times, Nagash rose to power after he was resurrected by killing the Tomb King's gods, I think, and he consumed their power to become the realm of death. And it would make sense if the realm of Shyish in the mortal realms is an amalgamation of all of the afterlives believed by different religions across the other realms, that they would spawn creatures of magic in a similar way, that Nagash would want to consume. And we also know that in one of the stories that came out last Christmas, in Christmas of 2016, Alariel and Sigmar reminisce about the Pantheon. There was a United Nations style temple in the realm of Azir where the 8 gods had embassies and where they would meet either in person or in incorporeal form to discuss matters of governance. And there were 8 temples, one for Nagash, one for Gorka Morka, and so forth. And we might see the future characters for armies get these Primarch or monster-sized kits as they return to the mortal realms. So hopefully we get a gigantic Teclis model, because I just want to paint the crap out of that.
Right.
Uh-huh.
What happened to wasn't Balthazar Gelt holding the Wind of Metal at some point?
Yeah. I don't know. Like they really played fast and loose with this premise I have, where it's like, well, the characters that held the Wind of Magic are the ones that survive the end times. By that logic, Caradryan should still be alive because he held the Wind of Fire. Balthazar Gelt should still be there. And Teclis, who held the most Winds of Magic at any given time, should be the most powerful god. Technically, by that principle, I think the second rule that should apply is if they were not given a plastic model, they're not going to come back in a way that we remember, if at all. Which boots out, like all of the elf characters were never made into, all of the elf special characters were never made into plastic. They were all made into Finecast.
Right.
Because Finecast went belly up. Those characters didn't make it, or didn't make it in ways that we wanted. Which effectively the Mortarks got away scot-free because Archon, Neferata, and Archon and Neferata never played an important role in the end times, but they completely, because we got a giant monster kit. I guess I get to survive. Like it was a free pass, basically.
I think Archon did just because he's the one who brought Nagash back.
Yeah, but they never held an avatar they never held the Wind of Magic. They never really they didn't get to be part of that wider pantheon. Right. And no other faction has stuff like that. Like all the Empire characters, all of the elf characters. I'm trying to think of what the ogre character, like Gogfag Maneater, or whatever his name was. He was Finecast. He's gone.
Yep.
I'm trying to think the orc characters. Yeah, Grimgor Ironhide was Finecast. Skarsnik just got renamed. All of the Chaos characters got renamed because they were Finecast.
Yep.
Although there is, in the Malign Portents book, there is a hint about Sigvald, because apparently some Caradhran overlords raided a temple in Shaiish, and they found, I think it was this mirror of everlasting beauty, said to contain the soul of the vainest individual who ever lived. And it was like clearly referencing Sigvald. It was like, yay, Easter eggs.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they could bring back Balthazar Gelt as like the avatar of metal, because they haven't even touched the realm of metal at all.
Well, they said that the two gods, the realm of metal is Grungni, who is a dwarf god, and the realm of fire is Grimnir, who's another dwarf god. I don't get that. I'm not well versed in the dwarven lore for original Warhammer, but I think they were always the dwarf gods, so they got a pass.
Yeah.
Like, and people keep asking, where's Karl Franz? But Karl Franz never got a model ever. No, he got the he got the plastic griffin. It's weird in the Order Grand Alliance book, like where you get all of the war scrolls and that's it.
Yep.
the picture of the Free Guild General on Griffin is a picture of Karl Franz in plastic, and it says Karl Franz on the torso. And people are wondering, it's like, does this break canon? Like, do people remember who Karl Franz is? Is that Karl Franz? And the answer by Games Workshop was no. Karl Franz is dead, but that doesn't mean people can't worship him now. Know what I mean? He's not the Celestin Prime. He's just the Celestin Prime is a regular person. Yeah. It's not Karl Franz.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Karl Franz didn't show up at some point as a Stormcast, like some random, like Lord Celestin or something like that.
I doubt it, but I don't want to rain on your parade, so I'm not going to say anything.
I'm just saying
Karl Franz won't, because Karl Franz in the end times kind of was just like the gateway for Sigmar coming back. Like
Sigmar occupies his dead skin.
Yeah.
And we also have Volton. That, I mean, he could potentially come back as a Stormcast too.
Volton.
Why do you say that? Because they specifically say Stormcast are heroes who died in battle in the mortal realms.
Yeah.
Stormcast. Yeah. Like there are no Stormcast of people from the world that was. People from the world that was get to be more important than Stormcast. I don't get why people say, "Oh, he might come back as a Stormcast." He'll come if it's an old world character. They'll probably come back as something better.
Yeah.
Know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think with Volton, he's already been replaced too. Like I think Vandus Hammerhand is the new Volton.
Yeah.
Their stories are pretty similar anyway, so.
Was Volton plagued by visions?
I have no idea. I feel like Volton was plagued by delusions of grandeur.
All right. No, I only say that because Vandus is kind of psychic, and like his lore is he's like constantly plagued by these flashes of the futures that may be, and that plays into the story a lot.
Yeah. The fluff is not something that I have gotten into for AOS beyond, passing interest.
Yeah. I had more of meant like Volton was kind of like chosen to be this like champion of Sigmar, and in a lot of ways, in a first amongst equals kind of way, Vandus is that same. Like when he was Vandus Black Fist, and he gets chosen to lead the first of the Hammers of Sigmar, and all like that kind of similarities.
He's Marnie's Calgar.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just way cooler. I hate Calgar.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be parallels to 40K at some point because they're games written by the same people.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's some very intentional parallels too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Well, one thing that I'm surprised people I can understand why people have this misconception, but it's always been chaos has always been less of a tool of corruption than destruction. It's always been death or like the Dark Elves, which have been the deceptive tropes.
Yep.
Right.
In that, like, we have now evidence in the books that there is a character in the Stormcast by the name of I forget his actual name now, but it used to be Torglug the Despised. Yeah, I forget his Stormcast name now. Atornus the Redeemed. There we go. And
there you go.
Kind of funny because he's effectively, if Gollum was a space marine, he used to be this Nurgle Chaos Lord, and the Celestin Prime killed him. And in his last moments, he realized that he made the wrong choice of turning to Chaos, this Nurgle Chaos Lord. And Sigmar realizes that doubt, and then picks up his soul and brings that soul to Azerheim to be made into a Stormcast. And then we get this character who has the education of a Nurgle Chaos Lord, which is 0, talking out of the face and body of a Stormcast. So he talks like Gollum, but he looks like a Stormcast.
Yep.
So he's like, "Me thinks you need to be dying now, Chaos Scum." And in the audiobooks, it sounds hilarious because that's what the character would sound like. Because he's not literate. He never learned how to read. He doesn't know how to write. And he doesn't know how to speak properly. So he speaks like some barbarian from the steppes.
Yep.
So chaos doesn't work the same way in fantasy as it does in 40K. In fantasy, it spreads like the flu. I'm sorry, in 40K, it spreads like the flu. In fantasy, it's never so subtle.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a misconception I thought people had.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be some parallels between the two.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the two universes are clearly intended to be connected by the Chaos War.
Yeah, but they're also supposed to be very separate.
Yeah.
Like I think they
But the
made the
same
decision.
they're traveling between the two realms.
Yeah, well, but they don't have memories or thoughts based on like chaos is supposed to be universal. So like the blood skull taker from one realm is not the same skull taker as the other realm, but every universe will have a skull taker. Is I think what their message is supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, because if it is the same chaos, like Age of Sigmar is not even happening because they're just bringing in their Space Marines and wiping the floor with everybody.
Yeah. It's not the same warp. I mean, people alluded to the fact that there was one Easter egg in the End Times written by Matt Ward, that because that book was written by Matt Ward, there's an Easter egg that when I forget who was in the realm of chaos. Prince, the Wood Elf Prince. He's now Araloth. Araloth goes into the realm of chaos for a little while, and he sees a tall silver man who can belch fire from one of his hands, and it's supposed to be Kaldor Drago, but it was just red herring, and like that's not actually Kaldor Drago. That was just the writers having fun. Yeah, they're not supposed to be the same universe. Like mainly in one universe, Slaanesh has always existed, and in the other universe, Slaanesh has an origin story. The elves never created Slaanesh in the original Warhammer world because Warhammer Fantasy came first, and in that universe there was always Slaanesh, and never in the history of Warhammer lore do they explain that Slaanesh specifically came into being during a time period where mortals were around. But in 40K, Slaanesh is only 10,000 years old because of the fall of the Eldar. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
But they are trying to link Slaanesh to the elves now with the new fluff because of like they do say like on the stream now and in like the marketing and like the books that Slaanesh is somewhere in a dungeon captured by Tyrion and Malarian, and they're trying to get all of the elf souls out of. That's story I would rather wait for them to fully develop before talking about it, because they're hinting at things, and it sounds a little silly, but it only sounds a little silly now because it's not fully developed.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
What else do you want to see? Like, obviously, we're going to get more Stormcast releases.
Yeah. I mean, 2 Stormcast heroes over a 6-week period, I don't think was wise. Yeah. But, oh well. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, like, the Lord Ordinator is clearly pretty, like, niche corner use. I think he's going to see the tabletop mostly in, I would say, like, general order allegiance armies.
Yeah. He lets you remake the College of Nuln with all the war machines you're going to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
but you already know what yeah. But
that would be a super fun list.
I mean, what do you want to say? I'm sure you've talked about it in your videos before, but I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
I genuinely don't even know. I don't know what direction they can go in. Stormcast are, I would say, missing war machines of any type, whether they are like cannons and all of those sorts of things, or something along the lines of like the Celestial Hurricanum or something like that. Like nothing like that has popped up in the Stormcast yet. And with the Lord Ordinator, that sort of almost seems like it's signaling that they might be releasing something like that eventually.
I hope not.
Me
I think,
too.
Yeah.
I think Stormcast deserve to have some dedicated weaknesses, and not having artillery just keeps them like feeling like a Warhammer fantasy army, where it's like you're never going to get artillery, you're never going to get magic. And I hope that they don't. Like, being Space Marines means that they eventually will, but I would prefer if they stick to having dedicated weaknesses.
Yep.
Like, but
Yeah.
that's just me. Like the Lord Ordinator, I feel like he's meant to be a free people's hero. He is Sigmar's ambassador to the wider world. Like, he's meant to lead and scry fates and not participate in a way that other Stormcast do with wider society. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I expect that we are going to get Slaanesh in January because we've now gone Tzeentch last year, Nurgle this year, and so like patterns say that, yeah, they've already done Khorne. Like, I can't see them doing another release for Khorne anytime soon. I mean, now I feel bad for Khorne now because Khorne's now the least competitive book out of all the Chaos stuff. They could do a Skaven release, but I feel like that's just gonna really stick it to Slaanesh guys, like people who want Slaanesh. Yeah, it's like, well, technically it's a Chaos release. It's like, Skaven, yeah.
Or they could just do a big fuck you to everybody and do a Beastman release.
Oh yeah, Beastman.
But I'm really, of all the things in AOS, I am surprised that Beastmen were not squatted. Like, I would have thought that with Tomb Kings, with Bretonnia, Beastmen were like the next least popular army. They were another old book. Why didn't they just kill them off?
Because they had too many plastic models. I mean, well, no, I don't want to. I just, they maybe sold more. I mean, I said I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to speculate about why Tomb Kings were squatted. Tomb Kings were the first army to be given an army book in Warhammer Fantasy. Like after for 8th edition. When 8th edition came out, the first army book was Tomb Kings. Tomb Kings had a crippling universal special rule that disallowed them from marching. Like, they were really slow. And they had Games Workshop at that time. This was before the Chapter House lawsuit. They had a lot of very powerful units in their army, which did not and have not received to this day miniatures, like the Hydra Titan, the Bone Giant, and certain characters just never got them. And then Vampire Counts came along, and Vampire Counts were head over shoulders better than Tomb Kings. People just stopped using Tomb Kings. They became the worst army in the game. And then Vampire Counts got another update and became even more powerful. So Tomb Kings just stopped selling, period. And I think that Games Workshop sealed their fate by making them just a bad army book. So people stopped buying them. Is that a reason to make them, like, I feel like they've learned their lesson because enough people on the internet have said, give us back Tomb Kings. So I think that stuff's coming. One day. Probably not this year. I mean, it's a little silly that this is supposed to be the year of death, and yet we are getting a Chaos and an Order book before Death so much gets a new unit. But from the preview today, we saw that pirate. Did you see the video, Paul?
No, I did not.
There's a little teaser video, and Games Workshop sometimes, usually they have supportive marketing to go with everything, but they just out of the blue just threw a teaser video up of an undead pirate ship or I'm sorry, it is a wrecked pirate ship covered in Sigmarite icons, like the twin-tailed comet. The masthead is a bearded dude with a hammer, and it's at the bottom of a fish tank. And they play spooky music behind it, and then a fish swims out from the behind the ship, and they just cut to a question mark. So people are saying it's Wraith Fleet. Wraith Fleet is a faction of undead pirates that doesn't have miniatures or dedicated art, but is in the Warhammer Age of Sigmar Firestorm box. So maybe this is a new death faction.
It's undead. It's undead fish people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Fishman, I don't get why this is a thing. I think this was started by Rob on the Twitch channel when Rob was working there, where it's just like, we can confirm Battletome Fishmen coming soon. And then they had a preview at LVO with a thumbnail of a Battletome Fishman. And I'm just like, hey, this is New Games Workshop. They're embracing meme culture, I guess. And then they put this video out today, and it has a fish in it. It's a real fish. It's not a plastic fish. And it's just like, is this it? Are they embracing more memes? Like, I doubt it, but that's not the video. That's the video they posted. So
I think the Fishman is just their like ultimate troll, like Rick Roll kind of thing.
Well, and they did the reset the clock in the video with the squats. There's a plastic Thunderhawk clock, and there's a plastic Sisters of Battle clock. And the Sisters of Battle clock in the video is 2 minutes to midnight. So people are like clinging to false hope beyond hope that, hey, the clock that says Plastic Sisters of Battle is 2 minutes to midnight. Does that mean that Plastic Sisters of Battle are coming? And it's like, I hope so. I just want them to stop fucking complaining.
The thing that they don't realize is that in that video, that Sisters of Battle clock is actually broken, and so it'll never move past 2 minutes to midnight.
Yeah.
We'll
see.
At least they're aware of people talking about it enough to make a joke about it.
Yeah.
So at least they know. That's better than just.
Well, they've made that joke more than once. When they first revealed that, hey, this is New Games Workshop, we're embracing social media. There's a video where they stick one of the guys in this recycling bin, and they show off, like, they're showing off new stuff, and it's just like, oh, look, a painted Magnus the Red. Why was this in the recycling bin? And then one of the Warhammer community guys pops up, and it's just like, I found all sorts of stuff in here. And it's just like, get in there, you git. And he closes the door on him, and it's just like, whoa, more stuff. Oh, Plastic Sisters of Battle. And then it cuts. Yeah. And that's how they showed off Magnus the Red. That was like in late 2016 when like Games Workshop was showing up. It's like, this is New Games Workshop. We're really committed to like being your buddies and rolling the internet.
Yep.
But my predictions for this year are I don't know about another elf army, but if they said they are, that's going to happen. There's going to be I am wondering if we're going to get a core rules change to Age of Sigmar this year.
I've been wondering the same myself.
Like,
at least a major change to the GHB.
Like, well, the main rule sheet is no longer included in these newer publications. Like, not since the Karajan Overlords book has there been a like the main rules are not in the GHB either. So It's like, I wonder why.
It might just be saving paper. That's been speculated a lot. It might be a printing thing that they might have shoved them in there before as like, well, we need X pages for our page count for the printer to have a more efficient print run. So well, we can change some fonts around and some pictures around and shove these rules in the back, and now it's the right page count.
Yeah.
And the game was early enough in its life cycle that the argument could be made too that someone just now getting in, like, we need more access for those rules, more ways to get them, and now they've kind of reached critical mass.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think the from the training, like the training seminars they send the store managers to, and then when they get back, it's like I feel like the 4 pages of rules is mainly a marketing thing. Like when
Yes,
someone new comes in, hey, you can play this game with 4 pages of rules. This is it. This is all you need. Don't look at that yet. Don't look at the 40K thing yet. Look at this. 4 pages. Done. And
I completely agree with that.
I think we need
Because
to move past that a little bit now.
holes. There's so many holes in the 4 pages of rules.
Yep.
Mhm.
And even in the General's Handbook, there's so many things that are just not addressed at all that you have to go find an FAQ to figure out how these things actually work. One of the big things that I noticed is if you go through the 4-page rule book, the word battalion does not appear anywhere.
Yep.
That's a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. And battalions do rule this game because of one-drop armies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They are incredibly important, and the fact that you can use a battalion to turn your entire army into 1 drop and dominate turn 1 is not in any way included in the core rulebook.
Yep. So maybe they're like they might release a new rule sheet that operates. You don't have to change any other publications, but instead of this 4 pages of rules, it's now 5 pages of rules. And here's what it is. Or they might just go full digital. I just think that they like the summer is usually reserved for their biggest releases. And last year was 8th edition 40K. So I think that they're going to do something really big for Age of Sigmar at the very least. I'm a little worried about 40K in a way that I'm not necessarily like an avid 40K player, but the universe seems fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
Like I don't know where they go from here. Like if all of the factions received codexes between last September and now, what do they do going forward? Like, don't they have to release Plastic Sisters of Battle because that's the only faction that's left? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you keep the game fresh? Just because it's the most popular miniatures game on the market doesn't mean that it doesn't get stale.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm really curious to see how they develop the game going forward. I mean, people are really focused now on like the return of Primarchs, but I'm not personally. What?
There's single models in each army. That's not that huge of a change.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a little cheap because it's rehashing the Horus heresy by saying, well, these characters that were in this prequel series have now come back to settle old scores, and that I don't think that helps the narrative. Like it just keeps it just the same beats. So like hopefully they do a new alien faction this year, or they do like Sisters of Battle or something from the Imperium we've never seen before. They have to.
They can always open a new Space Marine chapter.
They kind of did that with the Adeptus Custodes.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And Primaris Marines. Too bad Primaris Marines suck, but that's not what happens when they sell models. But so I'm thinking something over the summer for Age of Sigmar. I'm thinking after Daughters of Cain, I think Daughters of Cain is going to be it for the summer. I'm like for the spring, because that'll be done by the middle of April, end of April at the latest. I think at Adepticon we'll finally see Morathi, and like she'll be up for pre-order the week after that. That's my opinion, because they have to have something to reveal at Adepticon, and I think it's either going to be Morathi or Leman Russ, because I keep hearing Leman Russ is next for 40K. to come back.
Mhm.
I mean, we'll see. Like, hopefully they do more terrain, like the those War Scryer Citadel. Like, I want them to bring back the fortified manor.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you saw on Twitter today, Paul, but I put all of my terrain in one corner of my apartment, and it's
Mhm.
like it's about 20 boxes. Yeah, I have
20
it all
unopened
behind me.
boxes?
Most of them are unopened. Yes, I have to just get the masonite all cut so I can start putting terrain together. You will see some of it at Triumph and at my local club. I just want to improve all of the terrain that we have access to. I tend to think in extremes.
Yeah. I mean, if Keystone is not happening for AOS, it means I have to like go all in on Triumph.
Oh yeah, yeah. I hope you do, because I'm messaging people individually. I have a list of people who are more than likely coming, and it's around 30 people, which is already larger than Du Bois. So and that's just for AOS. So it's definitely going to be a fun time. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know for people out there who are watching right now, if you go to triumphgt.com, that's one word, you can find the pack there. We're just getting some information sorted in terms of who or what. Like the pack says one thing, the website says another. We're just working out the final details for because we've recently moved venues. We are no longer going to be holding it in a hotel. We're going to be holding it at Mythicos Hobbies, which is it's like a mini warehouse in Succossana, New Jersey, and we're just setting up block rates for a nearby hotel instead of holding it at that hotel. It's just cheaper. We have much more room. We're not infringing on other hotel festivities, and we have room for up to 40 players. But we know that Age of Sigmar is like the premier event for Triumph, and that if we exceed 40, we will definitely be able to have room for more. But I'm expecting between 30 and 34 players, which is already more than substantial. And definitely with all those fully painted armies on the table, it's going to be a great time for everybody involved.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pumped. I'm going to be bringing down as many people as I can from New England area.
Yeah, I started speaking to Drew Davis. He was the one who won best overall at Captain Con.
Mm-hmm.
Did you talk to him at all?
I have not.
Captain Con's in your area, right?
It's in Rhode Island.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that was the same week. No, that was the weekend after LVO, and we down in New Jersey had only unfortunately learned about the Age of Sigmar stuff there too late to attend.
Yeah, they definitely had. I don't know what happened exactly, but they definitely seem to have just some promotion issues with the event in general.
Mm-hmm. And that happens sometimes.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. I do the TO for the Age of Sigmar event is one of the guys in my local play group.
Okay.
So, definitely like tapped into that. I just ended up not going to it. Just from life circumstances and all that. Wanted to go.
We can't make it to every event. No one asks us to. It's just we do what we can. They are there to have fun. They're there for you when you are able to do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My plan, at least for this year, is to. I'm already going to Adepticon, but I'm only going with my old list. I don't have the time to fully paint like the changes I want to make to it. But a bunch of us down here are really excited for Nova, and that is shaping up to definitely be bigger than last year.
When and where is Nova?
So Nova is the Nova Open. That is in the Washington, D.C. area. It is one of those that was originally just a 40K tournament that exploded into a full-blown convention. I definitely had a great time last year, with the exception of a lot of people had issues with how the scenarios were written for the Age of Sigmar 2-day event. they were definitely on the casual side, to the point of being a little busy. Like certain things, just like, well, you have to take your army. Yeah, like for one scenario, it was like you had to take your army, divide it into two halves, um, excluding your general, and your opponent picks which half starts on the table, and the other half walks on turn 3. And certain people dropped the day of when they read those scenarios. They were written by individuals that were looking to create an experience that was um, not on the same wavelength as a lot of the competitive players. And they've taken the feedback, and they have promised that this year it will be a experience more in line with what people asked for, rather than what was offered last year. Not that it was bad. What?
When is it going to be?
I'm sorry. It's usually Labor Day weekend. Which one's the end of summer? Memorial Day is the beginning of summer, and Labor Day is the end of summer.
Yes.
Labor Day weekend. Yeah, and but they have.
I might have to make it down there.
Oh yeah, I had a great time. But a few of us went down this past year, and more of us are going down this year. They and Games Workshop does go, but they mainly host they do the 40K event, because this is another one where it's like it's an ITC sanctioned like final thing for 40K. There have been a lot of I don't want to say differences. It's just certain sections of the community for Age of Sigmar, at least in the States, and especially in the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom doesn't really use ITC. There have just been some creative differences in managing the overall tournament scene between ITC and other groups. So really, it has not permeated Age of Sigmar. I don't want to come down on one side or the other, because I know there are a lot of strong opinions on both sides of the issue that I personally have no stake in. So I'm not really going to comment on who's struggling with who or why. It's mainly ITC, Frontline Gaming, 40K centric convention. That's what Nova is. But Games Workshop also shows up. They do the Duncan painting courses. That you can go to the panels where GW is going to do another reveal. Like last year, they did the reveal for Malign Portents at Nova. And it's a really good time. I recommend probably carpooling and maybe splitting a room, because the hotel it's in the airport, like the Reagan Airport region of DC. So the hotel rooms can get very pricey, and the parking can get very pricey. So it's one of those events, especially if you can drive there, drive with friends.
Right.
That's the only recommendation I can really have for it. But I want to make sure I have a strong showing at Nova. I'm going to build a brand new display board that doesn't have portability in mind, because I can drive down there. And the list changes I talked about, provided there are no points changes in the GHB, will be showing up at Nova.
Nice. That is good to know, because, I mean, DC is not a ridiculous drive for me.
Nah. It took me 2 hours after I drove from work, which is nothing.
Yeah. And even if driving is not that reasonable, I mean, I can easily hop on the train to DC. Like, that's not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Amtrak goes to DC, and I'm sure there's a stop at or near Reagan.
Yeah. But Nova, if for anyone who's watching who couldn't get a ticket to Adepticon, make sure you get a ticket to Nova, because it's I'm not going to say the experience, like, I don't want to say one's better than the other, but it's definitely a comparable experience. It's a similar type of convention. It's a nice it's in a congested area of many hotels, so you're probably going to get a hotel near the event, and that hotel's going to be very nice. So you're going to be in for a treat if you're looking for a nice hobby-related vacation. There are plenty of panels. There are important painting competitions. Games Workshop staff are going to be there, like the designers, the community team. It's a really good time.
And it's nice and close to DC, so if anybody has any gripes with the government, they can go down to DC and flip off their least favorite senator, congressman, or government agency.
There you go. Yeah. But after Nova is Du Bois and Crossroads, Crossroads then Du Bois, for anyone who's looking for 40K and Age of Sigmar related play, which are in the Northeast. We don't tend to have as widely publicized events as the rest of the country because of our smaller player base, but we certainly know how to throw some nice events for those interested.
Yeah, and I'm beginning to wonder, in my local area anyway, I think it's more a matter of we just are not that well organized.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really working on starting to try and build a community, start having events, network with people.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you say like, oh, we're going to have an Age of Sigmar night at a local gaming store, half a dozen people just fall out of the walls.
Yep.
So that you've never even seen before. So I think it's a matter of getting stuff going. Like we're going to do at our local game shop, we're going to do the Malign Portents campaign. Get people involved, get people playing, painting stuff, buying new things, get involved in the game. Start having local one-day tournaments, start actually building a community of people, build a network of people. I need to get a little bit more on top of things, but I definitely want to try and replicate what you've done with the New Jersey Age of Sigmar Facebook group and do the same thing with a New England group and network between the two.
That's just knocking on doors is what I basically do. Because a lot of people know my name just because I show up to events and say, hey, hi, not going to leave until you say hi back.
Right. And a simple idea that I picked up from Scott R., the guy that was running Las Vegas Open. He happens to have family that lives in my area, so he just kind of happens to drop in once in a while.
Oh, cool.
Sends me a message hey, want to get a game. So, and he just has simple business cards that have their Twitter handle, their Facebook, all their social media stuff. Just here you go look us up.
And have you ever had Chuck Moore on the show?
I have not.
Chuck Moore lives in the Pittsburgh area. Him and a bunch of the guys who are in charge of Adepticon made this community pack. I think it's I forget the actual title of it, but it's basically so you want to start running events in your local gaming area, and they made this this whole packet of tips for people out there who have similar ideas to you and me, but aren't sure where to get started. And and while we were working, I finished. Can you see him okay?
Yeah, it looks like you was the scroll work on the cape not there.
Yeah, it wasn't there before, and I now have been able to glue him to the base.
Very nice.
This model is now done. Hopefully, I will be able to take good pictures of him over the weekend and send him to White Dwarf, because I have not had one miniature shown in White Dwarf yet. That's my next step.
There you go.
But getting back onto community organization, another thing that might help is one-day team tournaments. What Mythicos and our groups have been doing is hyping up so we're having a team tournament tomorrow with 20 people. It's from our local region, and it's just a one-day event, but it includes people from New York City, North Jersey, South Jersey, and it's mainly those areas. Philadelphia guys couldn't make it this weekend, but just one-day events, getting everybody in the same room just talking and networking, and like you might not get to know everybody, but like somebody is going to meet somebody else, and then they start playing regularly, and that gets them to buy more, paint more, play more, something like that. It's always good.
So, James, how totally, I mean, I assume you have seen the news that we are getting a, I guess, maybe mini Warhammer world in your neck of the woods.
Yep.
How excited for that are you?
I'm pretty excited. I'd be more excited if I knew I was going to be able to stay in the local area.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for while I'm here and whenever I come back to visit, checking that out. I'm a little bit skeptical, I guess, about the location. Like, I'm worried for the success of it because it used to be there was only like one Games Workshop in the local area, and that was actually right near where they're building this, and it failed and it went under. And now we have 3 other GWs in the local area that are all further north in the Metroplex than that one was. And so this one's going to be, like right basically on the ruins of the old GW, if you will. And I'm like,
so I have a little bit of information about the Warhammer Cafe, and this is from a Games Workshop employee who will remain unnamed, in that it will have around 4,000 square feet. There's going to be room for about 30 tables in there, and they're going to use it as a hotspot for the South. It's going to be like Warhammer World Light. There will be a coffee bar. There's going to be a mini restaurant, at least for the beginning. And I know people in the States tend to be skeptical because old Games Workshop, at least here, was known for being penny pinchers.
yeah,
And like you can look no further than the change in the stores, in that the stores went from being like 7, 8, 9 tables to being a table and a half, and people don't know why. But the intel I received gave me no cause for concern. It's in Grapevine, Texas, because they wanted to have it across the street from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. So if they wanted to bring in panelists for many games days, they now have that ability. And so much of their other staff and whatnot can be there on a moment's notice. And
yeah, they can major international airport. They could probably just get direct flights from the UK in.
Yeah, they can, and also their U.S. headquarters is stationed in Dallas-Fort Worth as well. So it makes sense.
So I'm hopeful for it.
Me too.
And they said that they will be holding events there, like smaller tournaments and Golden Demon, so that removes the them having to piggyback onto other events as much, to showcase their own stuff. And there's enough room in there for a few hundred people at a time.
Yeah.
So it's better than nothing.
Definitely.
And it's not a regular size store. It's 4,000 square feet. That's like a larger restaurant as far as I can do the math. So that's always good. Yeah.
And I mean, I know 40K is still popular in the area, and I started a Facebook group for the Metroplex. I don't know, probably about a year and a half ago, and we're up to, I think, almost 200 people locally for just Age of Sigmar. So there's definitely at least like a decent sized local crowd. They'll probably continue to grow if that pops up, or when that pops up, I mean.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a relatively inexpensive area to travel to as well. It's central in the United States.
I'm definitely going opening weekend.
I don't know about opening weekend, but I'd find an excuse to go.
Not many people know this about my family, but we have a very hobby-friendly family. My mother has never painted a Games Workshop miniature in her life, never rolled dice, but she has been to more Games Workshop stores than I have from her travels. I'm not kidding. Yeah, and she's going to increase that number because she's going to go to Singapore for business, like for her job. And it's just like, is there a Games Workshop in Singapore? And I looked it up. It's like, yes. What do you want from there? And it's just like, okay. But as soon as I told my family that there was going to be an opening weekend for this Warhammer Cafe in Texas, they said it's just like whenever you're going, just let us know and we'll book plane tickets with you, which I think is cool. So
That's pretty
whenever that's going to happen, I'll be there. I'll be there, just being the Warhammer aficionado that I am.
Yeah.
Do we have a rough date on that? I haven't heard anything.
No, not even close. I'm gonna guess before the end of the summer, though.
I hope so, because I'll still be here at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they would want to open that fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. I have to get up early for the tournament tomorrow, so I think I'm going to be signing off in a little bit.
Yeah, we should probably close things down. I'm sure my daughter will wake me up at the ass crack of dawn as usual, so I should probably go to bed as well.
Yep.
It's
nice talking with you too,
gentlemen.
tonight. And thank you for having me.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure as always. James, a pleasure to get you back on the saddle here and get you back in the YouTuber realm. Back in HMR.
Yep, I've missed it.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's been fun, everybody. Thank you all for watching. All of the viewers we've had here and there throughout the show. So I guess we will sign off and see you all later. Have a splendid evening.